yeah, I
Hi,
need to get.
everyone. I'm Wendy Darling, and I want to welcome you to the very first video for Miraculous Moments. And I'm really excited because Allan Karl is my first guest. I met Allan a few years back. We have a mutual friend, Steve Farber, and we met when Allan was speaking at one of Steve's events. And we have since connected, but we hadn't connected in quite some time. And Allan was the very first person to respond after I sent my first email out about my miraculous moment with my mom. And when I got his email, not only did it warm my heart, but it was like, I want to talk to that man again. So you get to be a part of this conversation. Allan is amazing. He's an author. He's a TV host. He is a professional speaker, and he is a world traveler. He has traveled to over 80 countries, predominantly on his motorcycle. So we could probably spend weeks, maybe months, Allan sharing miraculous moments and all the adventures that he's had. So without any further, I don't want to delay introducing you. Allan, welcome, being a part of our time today.
Wendy, thank you so much for the invitation. I was so moved by your miraculous moment with your mother that I took the moment, something we can all learn a lesson sometimes in this world of connection, to reply to you, to let you know that I didn't know the challenges you were going through with your mother, and to let you know that I really appreciated that story and was very happy for you in the sense to find joy out of a little bit of darkness sometimes that we all can
Yeah.
need. Yeah.
Well, it was such a gift because as soon as I got your email, I was like, oh, Allan, I want to talk to you. And so here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
So why don't you tell people a little bit about your journey, literally, because you founded a digital marketing company and you didn't exactly, you're not doing that anymore. Why don't you tell people a little bit of your transition?
A little bit of a serendipitous pathway, I guess you could say, that I took. So I guess to give your audience, you guys, a little bit of to frame who I am, what I've done is to tell you about my book briefly, Forks, A Quest for Culture, Cuisine, and Connection. 3 years, 5 continents, 1 motorcycle. And what I did, if you can believe it or not, is I hopped on that motorcycle and traveled for 3 years consecutively through 35 countries on those 5 continents. And yes, I've been continuing to travel since then, but to think about what kind of decision you'd have to make in order to just pack up and pull roots and travel alone, by the way, alone for 3 years. And the way that that story kind of came together for me is, you're right. I had been working in Orange County and Newport Beach at a digital marketing firm, and I decided that it was time to kind of either go big or go home. And that, in that sense, is the company had, maybe I had 20 or so employees, and I thought this is the time to either merge with someone or to acquire other companies. And what I did is I got some like-minded people in the digital marketing space, and we merged about 13 companies together to create one larger company over the period of about a year and a half. And this was a great idea because now we could aggregate our client lists. We had more resources. We had a bigger talent pool, and we were in more locations. We were in essentially 10 different cities across the United States. But this was at the turn of the 2000, the millennium. And what happened is the dot bomb came in, and that's when a lot of the technology companies and everything just kind of crushed. The stock market we went into a recession, and our company, and we had been, the way we acquired all of these companies, Lisa, not to get too technical about it, but we didn't use money. We used our own stock, our equity for currency. So we were just playing with funny money. And everybody, as this thing kind of crashed, all of our clients kind of crashed with it because we were serving high tech, largely a high tech B2B kind of client base. So, well, what happens is we somehow managed to convince a private equity firm to invest in our company. And the private equity firm, like all private equity firms, said, hey, don't worry, you just run the company the way you want. We're just there to give you some support. And by the way, no more buying companies with stock. That's why we're giving you this 20 million bucks, is we'll buy the companies so that we all remain a little bit, keep our piece of the pie about the same. And it was in September of 2001, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. We were in a big meeting in Las Vegas at the Hard Rock Cafe. And I was on the board of managers of this company with the private equity managers. And I sat in a breakfast meeting on September 10th. And I had this really knot eating at me in the stomach as I chatted with these guys. They had some ideas. I didn't agree with everything. Some things I said, cool. And I went to bed that night and woke up the next morning to a pounding on the door. Allan, we're being attacked. And that's when the planes had hit the towers. And we all know the story of 9/11 since. And it was at that moment, with that knot still burning in my stomach, the images of those planes going into our, World Trade Center, that I made a decision that I just didn't like what I was doing anymore. I didn't have that joy anymore. So I quit. I got home eventually and I wrote my letter of resignation. Now you have to understand, I quit the company I started. I mean, that was like my baby. I mean, really, I had put in over 10, 12 years of building this company and I quit. So what did I do? I did what I always do. And I just said, you know what? I'm resilient. I'm resourceful. I started another company doing exactly what the same thing I was doing, digital marketing and branding. But that knot still there, Wendy. And I just didn't have that sense of joy. And it was one afternoon, I walked into my garage and I looked, there sitting was my motorcycle. And it had been gathering a lot more dust than miles for sure. And I had been reading a book by a guy named Neil Peart. He's a rock and roll drummer, famous guy who also is a motorcyclist. He was with this rock and roll band called Rush. And we lost him in COVID, by the way. He died not of COVID, but he had been suffering brain cancer. But he had written a book called Ghost Rider. And I had just been reading it. And what happened to him, talk about loss. He had a terrible thing. In a period of 1 year, he lost his 17-year-old daughter in a car accident on her way to her first year at university. And he lost his wife of cancer. So even though he had fame, fortune, and all the money that comes along with, he had lost the two things that really meant anything. And he equated his decision to get on a motorcycle and ride as his soul had been just left empty. And he needed to, like a colic child, that the only way you can get him or her to sleep is to put him into the car seat and drive the car around and settle that angry soul or just unbalanced soul. And he got on a motorcycle and traveled. And as I was in the garage thinking of Neil Peart, he traveled to Mexico, he traveled down to Panama, he traveled all the way up to the Arctic Ocean. And I thought, you know what? I've always been a traveler. And I've always loved it. And I made the decision at that moment, why am I just starting another company just to put myself into that same treadmill again? And I started planning for this first trip that ended up being that book, Forks. So I know that's a long story, but I think that to give you a sense of how I came upon that decision is important, because we all are faced with change in our lives and decisions that we need to do. And this is what I chose. I mean, but it's that moment that we all have sometimes where we need to take our temperature, to look inside and understand, where is it that we find joy? You're a speaker. We all have friends and speakers, and there's a great friend of mine, another Hall of Fame speaker, George Walter. And he told me people make things so complicated. He says, it's pretty simple about finding joy in life. He says, look, if you do something and it makes you smile and happy and brings you joy, do more of that. And if you do something that makes you feel bad or negative or dark, don't do that anymore. And it truly is pretty simple, right? I mean, yes, there's complexities and we can get into that, but that is what gave me joy. And Wendy, I mean, I love people. It's why I travel is not to check off a bucket list. I don't believe in that word, that term, that concept. We're not here to check things off. We're here to connect with people and to connect with our environment and to connect with culture. And that's kind of that's who I am.
I know that's what's very appealing about you. But it was that very pivotal moment. So, how did you feel when you made the decision to get on the bike and start charting at least the first part of what turned out to be a 3-year journey?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, the first thing I did is I read a lot. I wanted to see what other people had possibly done this. How many people traveled the world by motorcycle? At this time, it's very few. I mean,
I can believe that.
there's more people that have summited Mount Everest than have traveled the world by motorcycle. But and today it's actually, I kind of an early pioneer. I mean, there's before even him is a guy named Ted Simon, a British. He was a journalist for the Telegraph, and he did this in 1973, uh, um, back before there was internet and before there were ATM machines and all this. And then there's plenty of people before that. But I started reading about all these people, about adventures, about things, and then I also started telling my family and my friends, and frankly, most thought I was absolutely crazy, suggesting that maybe before I go, I update my will, get my things together. They were convinced that I was going to be either killed, kidnapped, or ripped of everything I own. But
Sometimes when the people in your life start thinking you're a little bit nuts, might actually be you're on the right path.
I like that. Yeah, I agree. So while they thought I was nuts, they also gave me a bit of encouragement and let me know that they would be there to whisk me out if I got into any trouble or something. And I for the most part since then I haven't stopped traveling. The 3 years I did break my leg, by the way, in the middle of it, in the
I
middle of
know.
the middle of nowhere.
That's a miraculous story in itself. Can you share that, please?
Yeah, so I was in Bolivia, and the Andean mountains that run, almost the entire length of South America run right through Bolivia. And there is the Grand Altiplano, and it's the high plains that sits at about 13 to 14,000 feet. And in the middle of Bolivia, there's this place called the Salar de Uyuni. The Salar stands for salt. It's the largest salt flat in the world. In fact, it's so large that and it's so high in the world that it's visible from space. In fact, they even use it as a target to calibrate satellites. So I was on my way on this long 300 or so mile dirt road in order to get to the Salar de Uyuni to see the salt flat, which you can see the curvature of the earth. And on that road, that muddy road where there was nothing, all you occasionally would see a llama farmer, and you'd kind of go through, you'd see these huts every once in a while, but there was no towns, no cities. Well, I started rolling in after about 2 to 3 hours of traveling into this settlement, just a couple of adobe buildings on either side of the road. And because this is where all those farmers living in the hills come to get buses to get their supplies in the various the two towns, Uyuni's one and then Potosi would be the other. The road was all rutted and it had rained the night before, so it was muddy. And I'm cruising through this little settlement, and my bike is sliding and slippering like a slithering snake, actually. And all of a sudden, the rear tire washes out from under me, and I get smash down into the mud, and my motorcycle, which weighs about 400 pounds and it's carrying about 100 pounds of everything I own, comes crashing down on top of me. And I try to get out from under it, but it's a kind of a useless, because my leg is trapped under the pannier. And it's at that moment I feel the intense burning high altitude sun burning down, blazing through my visor and my helmet. And I look back down at my leg, and I make no mistake. I know it's broken, crushed. And I just fall back into the mud, kind of dejected and sad. And it's at that moment I hear a sound. An umbrella pops open. And then I hear that same sound again. Another umbrella opens. So suddenly, shaded, I cautiously lift open the visor of my helmet up into the eyes of two young boys, angels of mercy, looking down on me, holding umbrellas, shielding me from that brutal sun. That was a miracle. Absolutely miraculous moment is to see these people come out of nowhere. And I eventually had to be medevaced out, which was quite a challenge. I won't bore you with all that story, but I went.
But here you were in the middle of nowhere, and you have this accident. You're literally immobile in the baking sun, and here these two young boys come out of what really was nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, this little
Not-
town, where there's a handful of people that probably live there, but it's kind of like a transit hub, if you will, for the Altiplano farmers, growing their quinoa, rice, or whatever they're growing out there, as well as the llama herders. You do see quite a few llamas, which
Wow.
is always a nice sight,
Absolutely. Oh
something
my gosh.
soothing about a llama. I don't know.
So can you share maybe one other?
Well, yeah. So, when I first chatted with you, I wasn't going to share the umbrella story of these boys, but you kind of brought me into that, and that was good. So, I have to, because I travel so much, a lot of my miraculous stories relate to the notion that there are no real coincidences, and that things, some people say, oh, things happen for a reason. And I do believe that. I really do. And sometimes the miracle, the miraculous moment comes where something is unexpected, but yet it's known. And I'll be perfectly vague about it. And there are two actual moments like this. I believe that we are all connected. Wendy, you and I were connected through Steve, you mentioned at the beginning. I think our life is a big tapestry. It is woven, and the warp and woof of the threads, even though they connect at one end of the tapestry way down to the other, we just sometimes don't know that they're connected, because there's all this thread and weaving in between. So imagine this, that one of my great favorite places to visit, for a lot of people, is the Indonesian island of Bali. The
Mm,
Balinese people are very spiritual Hindu people, and it's a really beautiful place, and it's become so popular that I'm, a lot of times you don't want to go back to a place that you
mm.
might feel it isn't the way you remember it, and could that change? I don't let that really get in my way. But I had been to Bali years ago, and in a little town of Ubud, which is in the mountains there along the river, I I loved the traditional Batuan style of painting. It's a traditional painting of layers, where you see people working in lakes and rivers, and the mountains go, and it's some of them are really complex, and they're very expensive for the real good ones. But I found an artist tucked into a little alleyway down what little artist colony, and he had a smaller painting. It's probably about 3 feet by 2 feet, so not tiny but not huge like some of the great traditional ones. And I negotiated with him, and we chat and had tea, and it was really a fun moment. And I bought, one of the things, I don't buy souvenirs when I travel, but when art inspires me, I especially if I meet the artist, any piece of art that I have in my home, I actually have some connection with that artist. And to me, that really is the most important thing. So so I buy the painting, and then I think, oh, I'm gonna need a frame. So part of what the crafts that they make in Bali is these amazing wood craftsmen. They make these figurines. They make gorgeous, just the ornamental stuff on the Balinese houses. It's just amazing. So I found a woodworker guy, a carver, and I'm talking to him. I show him the painting. I leave him the painting. I'm like, I want a frame. Can you make this? I don't want it to be too overly ornate, but I want to have accents. And we go back his house in his workshop, and there's a big stack of wood. And he's like, well, what would you like? And I'm like, teak wood. And he goes, okay, here. So I pick out the wood, and he's going to now make a frame out of this Batuan painting. So fast forward, I finally get home. It's been sitting in my house, and I love it. 10 years later, I decide it's time to go back to Bali. And I bring my wife with me at the time. I was married. And I take a photograph of this painting framed, and I tuck it into my little satchel. And part of what I've in my mind to do is I want to go back and meet the artist if it's even possible that I could find him. So I go back to Indonesia, and we travel several islands, finally back to Bali, and I'm like, okay, let's go find this artist. So I remember about where it was. It's all different now, and I'm showing this to there's other artists, and I'm like, do you know who painted this? Do you recognize? There is a little signature in there. It's hard to tell, but it's not really legible, but maybe they can figure it out. And they're like, yeah, go down. Finally, one guy says, yeah, go down there. And I walk down there, and there's just a guy. His shirt looks like he hasn't washed it in a week. And he's got holes in his shoes, and he's just looks so disheveled. And he's like, no, I painted that. That's me. And I'm like, Wendy, I don't believe him. I think he just sees me, gringo, white American, and he's, going to try to sell me, show me, shows me his thing. And I'm like, you didn't paint this. Who is this? And he says, no, I swear I did the paint that. And I'm like, there's no way. I remember the guy, at least the best I can, for 10 years. And then to my surprise, he reaches into his trousers and he pulls out a stack of business cards about that thick, 2.5 inches thick. And he's like, I've painted paintings for people all over the world. He starts shuffling through this stack of business cards: Germany, Australia, Italy, New York, Florida, boom. And then as he's shuffling it, all of a sudden, there's my business card.
Wow.
He has got my business card in this stack, and he's been holding it for 10 years. I at that moment, I just reach out and I grab him, I give him a hug.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, I can't believe how I let myself kind of not believe him. I was the disbeliever at this point. But I think the miraculous moment is, he is so proud of his work and about the people he met that he's been carrying the business cards of these people for who knows how many years. And the fact that my card was in there, I mean, who else? I gave him the card, there's no question. And this is a moment of connection, of really, that thread. I say there are no coincidences. And I think about it really pretty often, that how many of us, maybe have a drawer full, and there may be some business cards from 10 years ago, but do you have them? Do you look at them? I mean, this guy looks at these cards any chance he gets, because it gives him an ability to travel back and kind of relish the moments that his art, that he has moved these people from all over the world with his art. And there they are in his trousers.
You're bringing up something really important. You know, just this past week, I put all my, I keep notes when I work with people, and I keep them in a folder. And I've had to use multiple folders over the years. And I think it's very similar to what you're talking about. Just the other day, I was looking at how high the more recent stack of folders I have. You know, it's like, I think a lot of times we lose sight on how many people we connect with, how many lives we don't even realize we've touched with, you know, here you went to look for this artist after all these years because his art really made a difference in your life. And I'm like that too. I actually have family art and art of different kinds. Art's very important to me. And so, you know, to recognize, you know, I have people that say, oh my gosh, I met you, or I heard you speak. And I'm sure you've had these moments too, but all of us need to pay attention, because that's what miraculous moments really are. It isn't necessarily the stuff, the souvenirs. It's the lives that we get to connect with, the lives that we have conversations with, the phone call that we happen to answer that it's a friend who's having a hard time, and you happen to pick up the phone, or you are the one making the call and somebody picks up their phone. And that is, to me, you know, that's what this is all about in my life, in my world. So I just love that. So in closing, what would you like to say to these people to maybe encourage them a little bit of how they can maybe pay either a little more attention to the miracles that exist, and also the miracles that already have and are yet to still come?
I think one of my, you know, mantras that I truly believe um, so much, and when it comes to the notion of miracles and the task sometimes in defining what is a miracle, and a miracle to one person could be this amazing healing moment that happened, you know, in a remote forest in Colombia where somebody spotted the Virgin. And now this becomes a pilgrimage site where people go for healing and miracles. But miracles can be other things like that artist. And I think that you have to be open to the notion that you can experience a miracle. Because too often I think we are closed, and this openness, not only to miracles, but openness to experiences, openness to people. You know, if you have to sometimes cognizantly have to be open, even to new food. You know, maybe in 20 years ago, you said, I don't really like beets. Well, have you tried beets lately? You know, they've maybe changed, or you've changed. And I use that as I have actually a post, a blog post I wrote about Eat the Beets, about somebody who I did encounter who was just so close-minded that he just refused to eat the beets. And through all of my just, you know, poor guy, the wrath of Allan on him. Come on, try it. Just at least try, you know, bam, 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 hammering him. He's like, okay, all right, I'll eat the beets. And he loved them. And he loved them.
Right.
So what happens if you're closed, you may miss the miracle. And you know, so be open, you know, smile. And definitely my last thing is always stay curious. Because when you're curious, you ask more questions. And when you ask more questions, you broaden your perspective and maybe have a greater worldview that will give you the opportunity to let these miracles come to you, and for you to grace miracles, help others as well.
Yeah. And of course, in this wonderful and unique and also challenging time that we're all currently experiencing, first of all,
Yeah.
believing that miracles of all kinds, you know, it's miraculous that my little heart goes pitter pat and works like a marathon runner 24/7. I'm totally grateful for that. And my lungs work. And, you know, they're all around us. And just like what you said, Alan, you know, we just need to believe and we need to stay open because there's so much that life is wanting. Anything that you want is actually wanting you. And you just need to be open to receive. So, my friend, thank you for being my very first video guest.
Hey, I am honored. I am honored.
I I was blessed and chose wisely, or you chose wisely, or it was chosen. And so
Yes, it was chosen. It was that fabric again.
that's right.
It was there.
And all of you, please let people know how they can get your book and your other videos, things of that.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
would you like
So
to know?
you can find me at World Rider, at World Rider, just like the world, and a motorcycle rider at World Rider, hashtag World Rider. My YouTube channel is World Rider. Twitter, I'm on World Rider. Instagram, oh gosh, go check out. I'm doing a series right now of travel portraits of just the amazing people I've met and the smiles I get. So go to Instagram, World Rider, and my blog is at worldrider.com. And but I'm Allan Karl, and I'm easy to find, and it's hard for me to hide. That's for sure.
Even in midst a pandemic where we've all
Even in the midst of a pandemic, you'll find me.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. And if I can also say, because I have your book, Forks is phenomenal.
Oh,
It is really, it's a work of art.
thank you.
And it is such a unique blend of photography, of Alan's adventures, and cuisine. There it is.
I mean,
It
look at
is.
this. Oh my God, that's the lomo saltado from Peru. Are you kidding me? I mean, look at the Argentinian thing. Now, then if you go this way, oh, who knows? You know, look at that's Chile. Anyway, it's a coffee table book. It's hardcover and it's now available in soft cover. Go to Amazon or on my website. You can find it.
Oh,
World
that's
Rider.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Adventurer, I thank you for taking the time to be with us today. You know, it's so affirming that this new journey that I'm embarking in talking to people in your miraculous moments is really intended to hopefully uplift and inspire others. And I know just you and I right now, I'm totally filled and nourished. And I thank you so very much for your time today.
Well, I thank you. I love the work you're doing, and I am so honored and humbled you chose me to be your first video guest on Miraculous Moments here, and I look forward to continuing the journey and the connection.